Systems video, SNS Repair Secrets. Throughout this video we will instruct you on how to repair the Super Nintendo system, which we will refer to as the SNS system, and its components. Now there's two things that I would like to mention before we get started. Number one is, you'll notice right off the bat it's not a very fancy video. We're doing it here at our workbench. Not a lot of fancy graphics or music or whatever, so the intent of the video is not to wow you with fancy subtitles and etc. The intent of the video is to train you on how to repair and turn around for your customers the Super Nintendo system, and we will do that throughout the course of this video. Number two, we're a very small firm. We don't make a lot of money off these videos, so I would ask you to respect our copyright law, our copyright on this video, and not make copies for your friends. If they need a copy or would like a copy, please refer them to Irata Systems, 2562 East Glade, Mesa, Arizona, 85204. This segment we're going to cover repair and maintenance of the Super Nintendo control deck SNS 001. The first thing that you want to observe is when you get the control decks in, you want to look for any kind of abnormality there might be. Check, first of all, the dust cover, push it down, check the connector to see if there's any obstructions. I've seen some that have had a lot of dog hair in them. I've seen some that have a Q-tip or candy wrapper stuck down in there, so you want to check for any obstructions. Use a small pick tool to remove that if it's there, but be careful not to bend any of the connectors. And then try it, test it out on your bench to see if it works or not. The first level of troubleshooting, what you need to do is you need to get an AC adapter that you know that is good, and you want to plug it in. And the first thing you want to do is turn on the unit and make sure you get a red light. At this point, if you get a red light, you know that the AC adapter is good, and you know that the internal rectifying and filtering circuit is good. You should get a red light at this point. If you don't get a red light, then it can be the AC adapter, or it could be something internal. If you don't get a red light, then the first thing you need to do is test the output of the AC adapter. If that is 0 volts, then what you need to do is troubleshoot the AC adapter. Okay, and that's a different part of the video. You can fast forward to that part if you want to find out how to troubleshoot the AC adapter. The red light will blip for just a split second. That's because there's some internal filter capacitors that need to be drained before you get inside this. If you do not, and I can't emphasize this enough, if you do not drain the internal filter, AC filter capacitors, and you get in there and start messing around, there's enough voltage in there that the CMOS chips and the main CPU and memory chips can be ruined, or you can actually damage something in there. So what you want to do is, as soon as everything's unplugged, make sure you go ahead. Now watch. You can see that light blipped for just a split second. That drained the AC or the filter capacitors in there. So be sure you do that each time before you even open the unit. Turn it on, make sure that light blips off, and then you can go ahead and proceed. Couple things I want you to note prior to going in to the unit. In the back here there's some switches and jacks and adapters that we want to mention here. First of all, if we go from left to right, there's a multi-out jack here, and what that is for is to take the sound in the video and feed it into one of your entertainment systems, such as a big large screen TV or a AM/FM amplifier, if you want the sound and the video to go into that, and that cord should have came with your unit. That can be bad or the cord going to the entertainment system, your external entertainment system, can also be bad. So check that. This is the RF output jack that takes the RF signal and sends it to your television. Now notice right here there is a 2-3 switch. Make sure that the customer obviously is attempting to use the Super Nintendo on the channel that this is selected for. You'll notice on this one that it's selected for channel 3. Now I'm going to select it for channel 4. It's now switched to channel 4. If the customer is trying to use it on channel 4, obviously, and it's set for 3, it won't work, and vice versa. In your area, wherever you are, your metropolitan area, you should set it for a free channel. For instance, if there's a broadcast channel 3, set it on 4. If you have a local broadcast channel 4, set it on 3, etc. We here in the Phoenix area have a channel 3, so I always like to set this on channel 4. The next thing you want to note is the AC adapter, DC in, it should be around 10 volts right here. Now, one thing, note that I want to make right here, this is kind of a sneaky maneuver on Nintendo's part, but when Nintendo released their United States version of the SNS control deck, they decided to put an AC jack and plug on here that is not industry standard. In other words, there are not too many, I haven't seen an AC jack and plug like this to date. And my hunch is that there's a couple reasons. One is they could have the customer's benefit in mind, and they didn't want you plugging in your NES or any other adapters into here and ruining this. But I think the second reason, and the more viable reason, is because now they control the market on this. You can't go into your local Radio Shack store and buy a replacement for this. You have to buy a genuine Nintendo AC adapter, and they sell for close to $20, which is about double what you can buy one for possibly at a Radio Shack or one of your electronics stores. So you'll note that is different. So just a little side note on the AC power here, and we'll get to how to repair this a little later on. I have not seen, unlike other video games that we get in, I have not seen a single symptom that is pragmatic or symptomatic of the failure of these SNS control decks. The failures have been spread around, from power on-off switches to bad connectors to broken AC adapters to torn off RF output jacks, etc., etc. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on inside the unit and show you how to disassemble the Nintendo control deck. Nintendo used a tamper-proof screw head on these, and in order to gain access to the internals of the Super control deck, you need a special tool for opening them up. We have the tools available. It's called an SNS opener, and so if you need one of these and don't have them, you can order them from Irata Systems. These are necessary, once again, for accessing the internals of the control deck. So what I like to do is lay down a towel so that it's not, you don't scratch the surface of the top when you flip it over. If you have microscopic dirt, or if you have a small screw laying there from previous repairs and you forget to move it, and then you move this around, you'll mar the top of this, and that doesn't make the customer too happy. So I like to lay a towel. Okay, I wanted to take it apart and get into the unit and show you how to do some repair once we get into the unit. As I mentioned before, you have to have a special tool for getting into the Super Nintendo. So here we go. Some people choose, when they remove these 6 screws, they choose to put back in normal screws with Phillips head on them. That's up to you. If you want to do that, then the customer will have access to the inside. So you can flip it over and the top just lifts off. Now what I've done is I've got a couple of butter dishes, and I've labeled one short and one long. And what I do with these is as I take the screws out of the Super Nintendo, I put them in here so that later when I go to put them back, I know which ones go where. So I'll set those up here. Now the 6 that I just took out, as I mentioned, they're special screws with tamper-proof heads on them, and those are the only 6 in the whole unit that are tamper-proof. So I usually put those in the small, but it's up to you wherever you want to put them. I'm going to put them in the long, and then there's more small than there is long, and therefore it's a little easier to sort them out when you get ready to put it back together. On the lid, a couple things you might want to look for. There is an interlock mechanism that Nintendo built into the lid so that when a cartridge is inserted and you turn on the power, the interlock lever mates with this groove right here in the cartridge. So you insert the cartridge, turn on power, and now the cartridge physically cannot be removed. The reason for that is if the cartridge is inserted or removed with power on, you can damage the cartridge. And several were damaged, I'm sure several million were damaged with the NES. And Nintendo designed this in so you would avoid that with the Super Nintendo. But just like anything else, the more parts you add, the more probability you have of failure in those parts. So you want to make sure that the lever action is intact and working. Sometimes there's dirt and gunk and even pop been spilled down in here, so you may have to take this apart to clean that out. And on this side there's a reset button with a spring here. Some of that I have these springs missing right here, and others have had the little push button broke or dirty, so you need to check those out and make sure they're fine. The dust cover door should be intact. It will not open with the power on. It just bumps into that lever. Okay? And if the door's broke or any one of these are broke, you can get the parts for the lid from us if you need to. So I'm going to set that aside with the cartridge. Now we take our first look at the inside of a Super Nintendo. You'll notice a couple things. One, there is an eject mechanism here. Nintendo designed this so that small children using the Super Nintendo would be able to remove the cartridge without having to pull up on it. You can push the eject lever and it will simply eject the cartridge very smoothly. Again, the off switch has to be off. On-off switch has to be off in order for that to work. To remove the eject mechanism, there's a little lever over here that you just lift up, and then you gently lift up on it, and then as you can slide it out, and that allows the eject lever to be removed. And then over here on the left side there's a spring. Now the spring, there's a top and a bottom. One is longer than the other. The longer arm goes on the bottom. Just remember that. It goes on the bottom and towards the outside. The shorter arm goes on the top and towards the inside. And I'll show you how that works when we go to reassemble this. So I'll set those to the side. The next part that you want to remove is the on-off switch. And these go bad, so you may, in the future, you may have to replace a couple of these. The way that you remove that is there's 2 screws here, and then a 2-pin header and a jumper right here that you pull off. 2-pin header and a connector that you can just pull off. So remove the 2-pin jumper, and then remove these 2 screws right here. Those are small screws and they go in the small tub. Okay? And then this just lifts off. You can lay that down in here. Okay? The next item you want to remove is the front controller jack and LED assembly. It's got the LED for power on, and it also has the two jacks for the left player 1 and the right player 2 hand controllers to go into. So that is removed by simply lifting up on the assembly, and then gently, as you hold the ribbon cable, gently rock it back and forth as you pull out on it, and it will slide right out. Okay? And that is one whole piece. So if any of these break, or if the ribbon cable is damaged, or the LED doesn't come on, and the LED is burned out, you'll want to you can replace the LED. It's a special LED, but you'll want to replace this assembly. Okay, now we're down into the guts of the Super Nintendo. You can see over here is this button right here is the reset button, and I've had a few of those go bad. So when the reset button is bad, you'll want to take this apart further, and you'll have to unsolder and replace that reset button. The next thing you want to do, there's 4 screws here and 2 large screws here that you want to remove. So we'll go ahead and take those out. First of all, I'll take out the 4 small screws. Okay. And that leaves us with the 2 large screws that also hold the connector down. Alright, with those 6 screws, the 4 small ones and the 2 large ones, you're able to remove the top RF shield will now come off. And this obviously is to shield the RF frequency interference that might come off the motherboard. Now you'll notice, now that we've exposed the insides, there's a couple things. You'll notice that they're all surface mount, and very few shops, even the authorized repair centers that I've visited, and I visited a couple of them, most of them are not geared up for removal and replacement of surface mount technology parts. If there's those of you that are brave enough that want to proceed with that, you can get chips, certain of these chips, but others are proprietary chips you must get from Nintendo. This chip right here is the CPU. This chip right here is the RAM chip that services the CPU. It's the right memo pad, if you will, of the CPU. These 2 chips, this is PPU1, this is PPU2, and these are the SRAM chips that service each one respectively. This chip up here is a, this one right down here is the CIC chip, which in conjunction with the reset circuit checks for the integrity of the cartridge to make sure that it's a real Nintendo authorized game. If it doesn't have a similar CIC chip up on the game cartridge, it issues a reset to the CPU and the PPUs every 10 seconds or so. So this chip goes bad, and if it does, you'll get a flashing screen, just as if you or no screen at all, a blank screen, because it's not functioning properly. One thing that goes bad quite often is the 62-pin connector that's located right here. That connector is removed by simply gripping it on either side and gently rocking it back and forth, and it will then lift off. You need to be careful because down inside the underbelly of the connector is a plastic spacer, and on some of them they're loose and will come right out. Others they're pretty snug. This one is pretty snug. This connector can be replaced, and often get them in where this is bad. Someone's got in there and tried to clean it with a Q-tip, or use some foreign object to try to clean that with a pair of tweezers or something. It also can be filled with dog hair or human hair or just dust and dirt and lint if people are not real careful about what they do to clean this. Can be purchased from Irata Systems. The current price, for current pricing, call or send a letter to 2562 East Glade, Mesa, Arizona 85204-6208, and we'll send you a current listing of what the parts are available in their current pricing. Here is the reset button, which we've had to replace before, and once I get this apart, I'll flip it over and show you the bottom of that and how to replace that. Located over here is the 5-volt regulator, which is used to regulate incoming DC voltage to 5 volts for the motherboard. And you'll note right down here next to the 7805 is a 1.5 amp fuse, and that if something goes wrong on the inside, or if water's spilled on the inside or something to that effect, this will blow, and once the water evaporates, if there's no damage done to the motherboard, this fuse can be replaced and everything will function properly in there. So let's proceed. The next item you need to remove is the sound module, and there's 2 screws, one down in this corner and one down in this corner, that once the screws are removed, it will be released. And one thing I failed to mention earlier is you need to be careful about static electricity. You'll note that I'm working on a wooden bench, and in the shop area where I'm at, we don't have any carpet on the floor. There is a towel here, but the static is kept very minimal. You may want to wear a static bracelet if you're depending on the conditions of your area. If it's susceptible to static, you may want to wear a static discharge bracelet and ground yourself, because these are very, very sensitive to static. Whenever the board is removed or inserted, I recommend that you use a static protective bag to keep it, and when you transport it back to us or re-transport one to you, I recommend that you keep it in one of those bags in order to protect it from static and further damage. So now that those screws are loose, you gently rock the sound module back and forth, and it'll come right out. The 2 screws, again, are the small variety, and I just place them here. This is the sound module, and it's a contained unit. We just swap these out. If there's something wrong with the sound and you suspect that it's the sound module, go ahead and ship these back, and again, call or write for current pricing. With the sound module out, it exposes one of the final 3 screws that we need to remove in order to get into the motherboard. There's another, right up here in this corner is another short kind of copper gold screw. And then on either side of the RF modulator is a silver screw which needs to be removed. Okay. Now that those are removed, okay, the silver screws are of the long nature, same as the long ones, and the short one is the short one. This is the printed circuit board for the Super Nintendo. You'll see that it's pretty much a complete unit. There's only a couple things that you can replace at this point, unless you're geared up to do surface mount technology. You can replace the reset button here. If you flip it over, you'll note that there are 4 solder joints right here, 1, 2, 3, 4. Desoldering those, and you can gently rock the switch back and forth, and then it will lift out, and you can replace those. Again, over here is the 7805 5-volt regulator, which can be replaced, and the 1.5 amp fuse. Okay. Under here you have a 1,000 microfarad 25 volt filtering capacitor. And then back here you have the RF modulator and the output ports. Okay? Now you can break this down further by removing these two screws and the two screws over here, and then the retaining screw for the 7805. The 7805 will run warm, and that's why it's bolted to this large heat sink. So if you're gonna remove this and do any testing at all, be careful, because you don't want to remove the heat sink and replace the 7805 and then run the 7805 without some kind of heat sink to pull the heat away from it. Okay? What I would recommend that you do at this point, if this is bad, you can remove this heat sink if you want. Okay, to break this down further for shipping, you may want to remove these 5 screws, 1, 2, 3, 4 underneath, and then the 5th one holding the 5-volt regulator. This is the only screw that you removed in order to replace the 5-volt regulator. Simply unscrew the nut from the 5-volt regulator. If you remove the bottom 4 cut that one. Here we go. If you remove the bottom 4, then the heat sink can be moved, and that exposes the RF modulator and your filter transformer if you want, filter capacitor, if you need to replace that. If you're getting any kind of 60 cycle hum or anything, it might be that, or it could be your AC adapter, whichever. Now you can replace the RF modulator if you choose. There are 2 screws that need to be removed, 1, 2, and then there are 4 solder connections that need to be desoldered. Okay, occasionally you'll get units in where the RF RCA jack is broken or mangled, or this 3-4 select switch is broken off. At that point you'll have to remove the RF modulator and send it in for replacement. These 2 screws are 2 of the screws that hold it in at this point, and then there's 4 connections here. There's ground, audio, video, and B+ that go to the RF modulator, and once you remove those, this can be pulled out and sent away for repair. At this point, basically all that we can do is board swap. Not many of you are set up to do surface mount technology removal and replacement, and these chips are very difficult to get. So at this point, what I would recommend that you do is get a static protection bag, insert the circuit board into the static bag, secure it with a piece of tape, and then you can mail it to us for replacement. To be honest with you, even the authorized repair centers that are out there, the 300 or so authorized repair centers, this is all that Nintendo will allow them to do, is to do board swap. They may not even let them get this far into it. They have to send this board back for replacement. So check with us on current pricing. We're competitive so that you can still charge a fair price and still make enough money to make it worth your while on a repair should the board go bad. Okay? Send that off to us. Want to mention a couple things. You'll notice that in the bottom of this there is an RF shield, a bottom RF shield, which is quite large. Then even below that there are two U-brackets that fit in the bottom cover. And the reason that Nintendo put these U-brackets in is so that you can secure that at a desk. You can place this on a desk or a flat surface somewhere and drill access holes up through the bottom, and then you can screw it down to the desk so that it cannot be removed or stolen. And it's good for demo purposes, or if you, for one reason or another, if you have a unit that you want to put on a bench for test purposes, then you may want to look into securing that so that it can't be removed or stolen. But the reason I mention that is if the unit comes in very dirty, you may want to wash this off also. And when you turn that over to wash it off, those will fall out, and you may not know where those go, but that's where they go. We're going to pause the cameras, we're going to put it in time-lapse photography, and I will do the reassembly in time-lapse photography, and then we'll come. Okay, now at this point, a couple questions that come up that I want to mention. The ribbon cable that goes from the front controller jack LED assembly onto the motherboard of the Super Nintendo does not go under the RF shield. It goes above it. Some of you have tried to route it underneath there and it gets cut. Watch out, and it goes above it, as in this case. Okay. So you can almost date when your Nintendo was manufactured. If you look on the bottom of the unit, right in here, it lists the U.S. patents that are covered by that Nintendo holds that are supposed to be incorporated in this device. I have a file where I keep a copy of every single patent that Nintendo has. When I first got my Super Nintendo, I immediately went down here and I looked up the patent numbers that are listed here, and I had every single one of them on file except the first one. And the patent number that was listed on there was 4,779,635. So I went through my file and found that patent did not exist as far as Nintendo owning it. So I went and did some research and found out that number actually made reference to a dome top tent. I got a copy of the patent, wrote Nintendo a letter, and told them that their bottom sticker was in error. What they should have put on there, instead of 4779, they should have said 4799. So subsequently, I received a nice letter back from Nintendo thanking me for my observation, and the newer control decks now have made the correction, and they say 4799635 on the bottom. Just an interesting side note you might want to take note of. This is what's called the Nintendo Super Famicom, and it is the Japanese version of the Super Nintendo. It was released almost 2 years prior to the release of the Super Nintendo in the United States. You'll notice that it looks, when compared to the Super Nintendo, there's some very similar type features. The slots are in the same location. The power's in the same location. The eject button's similar, and the reset button is similar. They've moved the power light over to here, where it's down here. Frankly, the people that I've spoken with prefer the appearance of this over the appearance of this unit. As far as the front, again, the jacks, player 1 is on the left, player 2 is on the right, similar to the United States version. The controllers are interchangeable. You can use the controllers on either unit and they're interchangeable. And once you get down into the guts of the machine, the on-off switch and the printed circuit board and everything are identical. The problem is, in Japan, they actually have a channel 1. In the U.S., we do not. We have 2 through 13. So their RF modulator goes channel 1, channel 2, where ours is channel 3, channel 4. One interesting note, and I think I might have mentioned this earlier, the AC adapter for the Japanese version is a standard barrel connector. So the Japanese consumer can go into any electronics store and purchase a replacement AC adapter. As a matter of fact, the AC adapter for the NES and the AC adapter for the Super Famicom are interchangeable. So you can use your RF switch input and you can use your AC adapter, the same ones, on either your NES or the Super Famicom. When Nintendo brought it to America, I guess they wanted to capture and hold captive the people who buy Super Nintendo. So they changed the barrel connector on the back of the American version to be the pin barrel, which is a very strange, as I mentioned earlier, a very strange jack and plug arrangement. I've never seen that anywhere else. So what Nintendo's trying to do, in my opinion, is force you to go back to them to get the AC adapter from. So what that does, in my opinion, is it forces the American consumer, when your AC adapter breaks, and that's one of the high failure rate components if you'll find in units, is it forces the American consumer to come back to the only source at this point that manufactures this AC adapter, and that's the Nintendo. Well, we have a way of getting around that, which I'll show you when we get to the AC adapter. You can either go in and modify this. You can cut out this old one. Unfortunately, it's incorporated into this whole back plastic, this whole plastic piece. It's incorporated into that, so you'll have to cut it out and solder in a standard barrel connector, which I don't recommend, incidentally. Or you can make an adapter and then use standard AC adapters, like I will show you when we get there. Another common request that I get is, can we play the Super Famicom cartridges in the Super Nintendo? Well, what Nintendo did is, if you look at the design of the Super Famicom, they're almost shaped like a D, whereas the American version is a rectangular shape. The openings are identical, and like I said, when you get down inside the machines, they're the same. If you take the circuit board out of this machine, or out of this cartridge, and place in an American cartridge, it will play in either machine. The software will play in either machine. Unfortunately, Nintendo designed the cartridges so that they're not interchangeable. The American cartridge is too wide to fit in the Japanese version, and the Japanese version, although it will fit down in, what Nintendo did was they designed two little grooves right here, and to match that, if you look in the top, and I'm not sure if you can see this real well, but in the top there are two grooves right here, a groove here, actually a ridge here and a ridge here, which mate with these two grooves when it's inserted, and allows it to go all the way in. Can you see that here? Alright, so you can see how the groove and the ridge mate and allow the connector to go all the way in. The game cartridge in the connector. Unfortunately, when you try to insert a Japanese version in, it doesn't have the grooves here, and it hits on these ridges and is not able to be inserted all the way. So the way that you get around this, to modify this, is you simply remove these two ridges inside the American version of the Super Nintendo. At that point, the Japanese cartridge will insert, and if you remove the ridges all the way down to the base, and you do a good job at it, you will be able to insert the cartridge all the way in. I've done a couple of these, and it works fine. The one caveat that you have to be aware of is when the ridges are removed, the cartridge can then be twisted around and inserted in backwards if you really try. It doesn't go in very easily this way, but you can put it in this way. So you need to be careful that if you make the modification, that you warn the user that the cartridge can be inserted backwards, and it will turn on. Actually, I'm sorry, it will be inserted, but the power, you won't be able to get it to turn on, but it can be inserted. Okay? Now, one thing, again, since this groove has to mesh with this lever, if you don't file these ridges down all the way, and the cartridge isn't inserted all the way, then this groove will not line up properly with this lever, and you won't be able to get it to turn on. So sometimes you have to do a little fine-tuning so that this will be able to insert all the way, and you can turn this on. The best way that I've found to remove those ridges, if the end user so desires, is to use a standard soldering gun. And to go ahead and burn them out from the top. The problem is, if you're not real careful, you can actually bump the top of the cover and mar it. It'll melt a little away and it doesn't look real nice. So what you have to do is the reset and then the dust cover lid. Okay? So I'm going to take the inside and I'm going to set that aside for a minute. Okay? The first thing that you want to do is you want to remove the lever screw right here. Now there's a white washer that goes with that, and then the lever just simply lifts off and pulls out. Again, it goes like this. There's a white washer that keeps, kind of a nylon washer that keeps it smooth, that goes right in there. Once that is removed, once the one screw is removed to the lever, it exposes the 7 screws that you must remove in order to get the lid off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I'm going to go ahead and quickly remove those. And they're of the short variety, so if you're doing this at the same time and you want to get in there, if soda pop or coffee or something has been spilled in there and you want to get in and clean the insides of this, they can be mixed in with the short screws that you've taken out of the other unit, and there won't be a problem actually. Okay, now once this top portion is loose, you have to release this spring here, so that this, which is the return spring on the reset mechanism. So what you need is a pair of needle nose, or you need a real fine pick tool in order to get that. So what I usually do is just unhook it right here, and then you can actually take the spring completely off. Okay, I guess then we'll cut back in. So now that you have all the screws loosened and you've got the spring removed, you can simply lift up on this upper cover and lift it completely off. The screws will drop off. Again, there's 8 screws that you need to keep separate. This then can be washed and cleaned if it's dirty. Now there's two things here that you got to watch out for, and that's the first, the lid. There's a retaining spring right here that holds the lid and keeps it closed. Be careful that that doesn't spring off. One end has a little hook on the end. The other end is completely straight. The hook end goes towards the outside or towards the bumpy side of the cover. Okay. Now with these screws out, there's a part on the other side of the lid that comes off. The label that says Super Nintendo will actually come right off. Alright? Now that's because this is changed, and there's a Spanish version and there's a probably a Korean version or whatever, so that they can interchange these. Anywhere that NTSC is used or this model is used, they can use those. Now there's some plastic that hold these two together. You can leave those right together, and when you immerse that in water, work them back and forth, and what that'll do is that'll work out any kind of soda pop or anything that's in there, any kind of dust. Or you can actually use some needle nose and pry on these, and they'll pop right out. But I don't recommend that you do that. That's as far as I take it when I disassemble it. Okay. Now this is the part that you actually want to modify, and I'm not sure if you can see inside there. But these two ridges that I spoke of earlier are the two ridges that deny the Japanese cartridge entrance into the cavity of the American Super Nintendo. So if you take these two ridges right here, at this point you can take a hot soldering gun and you can get access, and you can literally melt those ridges right off. And then once you've melted them off, being careful that you don't nick the sides, you got to exercise a little skill. You can use a flat tipped soldering iron. This is not turned on, so don't touch yours, but you can use a flat tipped soldering iron to smooth those ridges back down again, and you want to get them as flush with the existing surfaces inside here as possible. The smoother it is, the better insertion you'll get when you insert the Japanese and the American cartridges in. So I'm going to go ahead and put this back together. The thing that you got to be careful of when you put it back together is, like I say, the spring on the door is a little tricky. So what I do is, first of all, you put the label on, and I hold that with one hand as I flip it over, and then I gently insert this lever in its retaining hole. I'm not sure if you can see that. And now the lid is secured. Not secured, but the lid and the label are in place. So once you've got the lid and the label panel in place, simply return the bottom panel into its location and replace the 8 retaining screws that are there. Those of you that don't want to watch me reassemble this can fast forward through this, obviously. To reattach the reset spring, I hook it on the white nylon first, and then back down around the gray Nintendo lever. Now it's in place. The reset should return to its location. If the spring is missing or gone, you can just go down to your hardware store and you can make a spring, or you can call us and we'll see if we can't get some for you. We supply these. We need to check availability first. Then the last thing you want to do is replace the lever. Slides in here. Make sure it's hooked on here and here. Replace the nylon washer, and then the retaining screw. And you've now reattached the upper lever. Okay. Now when you reassemble this, make sure that you either have the power on or the power off, and that coincides with this being on and off. Okay, so what I usually do is turn this off, and then make sure this is pushed down all the way, and then you're able to get that back together. Make sure the power works, and that's really about the only thing that you gotta Okay, now before we leave the NES control deck, what I would like to do is show you how to properly clean the control deck and the games that are associated with it. With your packet, you should have got a sample of one of our clean sticks. We have two sizes actually. We have the small size, which is good for cleaning game cartridges. We have the large size, which is good for cleaning consoles. The larger and the longer stick were designed to reach inside the NES, but it can also be used, because of the broader width of the cloth, can also be used to cleaning the Super Nintendo. These are called Irata Clean Sticks. It's a very high-tech item that we use for polishing the connectors. This is the cloth that is actually used in polishing silicon wafers in approximately 95% of the chip manufacturers throughout the world. In Japan, in Germany, and in the US, all of the large chip manufacturers use this very cloth to do the polishing of the silicon wafers that go into manufacture of the IC chips. So it's a very high-tech item. Don't let it deceive you, because it's mounted on a popsicle stick. This method allows us to get the product to you very inexpensively, and it also allows you to get a very good finish on the product at a very low cost. The next thing you'll need is some alcohol, and the higher the percentage the better. This is a Thrifty brand, 91%. If you can get 99% alcohol, that's even better. 91% is better than 70%, obviously. For this demonstration purposes, I have the 90%. Basically what you do is you just take the smaller stick, dip it, immerse it all the way in the alcohol. Then you take the game cartridge and you simply run it along the upper edges of the connectors in this fashion. Flip it over and run it on the bottom edge. Okay? And then allow the alcohol to evaporate. Now you can use the same clean stick, if you choose, to clean the console with. Now when you open up the console, you'll notice down inside the connector has two sides to it. It has a small side here and a small side over here, and then it's got a number of connectors down the middle. What I recommend that you do is simply insert the corner of it, inside and run it sideways, and then you can do it on either side too. Simply insert it and then move it in and out on either side. As of yet, as of today, Nintendo does not have a game that utilizes the channel with the four connectors on this side, or the four connectors on this side. It mainly uses the middle. So it loads. Now if you use the wider clean stick, what you can do on it, and this is what I recommend, is you trim it flat about a ½ inch above the popsicle stick. If you're using it on the Super Nintendo. If you're using it on the NES, you go ahead and leave that on there, because it gives you extra length to reach inside the cavity. But for the Super Nintendo, you need to cut off the top of that down to about a ½ inch, like I say. Take your alcohol and simply dip the alcohol. Simply dip this in the alcohol. You can drop a few drops across the top if you want. But now that you have that squared off, you can actually insert that inside the connector and move it up and down. I wouldn't recommend that you move it from side to side unless you use the corner. When you use the corner like that and you tip it, it gives it an edge in both directions. When you're like this, it's a blunt edge against the side of the connector, and you can actually bend the connectors, so don't do that. If you're going to put it in this way, insert it straight up and down and just move it up and down. And what that will do is that will clean the contacts inside. Then you might want to rub the top of the connector to remove off any kind of dirt, and then go on either side of the internal connector to remove any dirt that might be there. All right. Okay, I'm going to talk to you now about how to properly clean the cartridges. You'll notice that on the front there's a couple of tamper-proof screws, security screws. What you'll need is one of the what we call is the NES game cartridge opener. It also works on the Super Nintendo. It's a little device that we sell, so if you need one of these and don't have it, you can write to us for price, write or call. What it does is it fits right into that opening, and this device also works to open the NES game cartridges. And the same method is used to clean NES game cartridges. First of all, remove those two security screws, and then the lid will just hinge open. There's a couple of notches here that have to mate with these two openings. Now, one thing that you'll note immediately upon looking at the cartridge, there is a battery inside the cartridge. When you get to a certain level on most of the games, there's two ways of accessing a higher level. One is such as Pilot Wings, where you have a code that you put in, and once you put that code in, it jumps you to a certain level, and a different level depending on the code that you put in. Or you can actually save the game, but in order to save the game, most games that are saved, you have to have a battery on it to retain memory. If this battery goes bad, it needs to be replaced. These batteries are also available from us, so if you need one, go ahead and give us a call. To check battery, it's a 3-volt lithium battery. To check the voltage, flip it over. Need your meter. Turn your meter on. And it needs to be on DC voltage in this case. Okay? Touch the two leads, and you should read really close to 3 volts. It should be over 3 volts. It should be 3.3 or 3.4 volts. But if you don't read close to 3 volts, okay, if you read less than 3 volts, then chances are the battery's dead and it needs to be replaced. So we will show you how to replace the battery in just a few minutes. But what I wanted to do by taking this apart was show you some items in here. This chip right here is called the CIC chip, and it's Nintendo's part number D411. That chip talks to a chip on the motherboard, and what happens is every so often the chip on the motherboard sends a signal out to this chip. This chip then echoes it back, and the two talk to each other continually. If this chip is not present on the game cartridge, then what happens is the chip down on the motherboard issues a reset to the CPU, and it causes your game to flash or to reset. It won't flash, it'll reset, and the game just won't work. So if this chip is dead, occasionally what you'll do is you'll get in cartridges where they don't work or they reset. This chip could be bad, all right? This chip is also available from us. It's the D411. You can get this chip from us. Okay? There is some addressing chips that need to occur. So this is a chip. This is a 74LS139N, which assists in the addressing and bank selection, page bank selecting. And then in the newer ones, it's called a mask ROM, and it's like where the program and the characters are stored for the game. And then this is a little 16K SRAM chip that is kind of like a scratch pad for the game. It's where it records where you're at, and different things like that. And that battery right here is necessary to keep the memory of this chip active. All right, so that's basically the layout of a cartridge. Again, this was Super Mario World, and that's the layout of Super Mario World. The proper method for cleaning this Super Mario World is to take one of our clean sticks, take alcohol, standard isopropyl alcohol, take the highest percentage you can get. In this case, we're using 91%, as we've shown you earlier. Simply dip that in there, saturate it with alcohol, and then rub it back and forth. All right. If there's any grime or anything on the contacts, this will remove it. Occasionally, you will have to rub very hard to get the dirt and the grime to be removed, but most of the time this is sufficient to do it. If they're real bad and the contacts are really dirty, you can use a standard eraser. If you take an eraser and rub it along the contacts, you're removing just a few microns of the gold plating, but it will get down below some of the dirt and gunk that is not removable otherwise. So go ahead and you can use an eraser or our clean sticks. Our clean sticks are probably a little better to use because they're standards, industry standard. Okay, now once that's cleaned, you might want to check the cartridge to see if there's any obstructions in the game cartridge. It lies flat, face down towards the back of the cartridge of the case, and then the top part hinges in, and the top then is folded over. You then replace the two security screws, and you're now back in business. I wanted to show you up close is how to replace the battery. Okay, take it out. Again, you'll need a soldering iron. You'll need some solder wick or a desoldering tool. So let me get those real quick. Here's the soldering wick. Cut off any portion that's already been used. Alright, and then once you're sure your soldering iron is warm enough, simply apply the soldering wick and the iron to the solder. As the solder melts, it should be absorbed into the braid, and if there's a lot, you'll just have to run it along until the hole's empty. Okay. Now, obviously, if the battery is bad, you won't be able to store any games, and they'll come in and complain to you that they're not able to store any games or store their game. And then I move that back and forth to make sure it's free to move, and you're able to pull that out. That one's free. This one over here is a little trickier. Okay. This larger one, since it's larger, it takes a little more heat. Okay. And once that's loose, you can rock your battery back and forth and make sure that it's out, and then pull the old battery out. Okay. So set that one aside. Battery that you've pulled out, the plus portion of the battery, I want to make sure here. The plus portion of the battery is this larger and the negative portion is the smaller leg. Okay, so set that aside. When you replace it, You may get an exact replacement. In this particular case, they're not the same, or they are the same. They're not different. And so you have to make sure that you watch how you replace it when you replace the battery, that you get the minus and the positive locations. Okay, so just replace the battery, place the battery into position, push it down where it's supposed to go, and then you bend the leads over to give you somewhat of a secure position so it won't fall off when you turn it over. And then reattach the negative and reattach the positive end of it. Okay? And once those are soldered on, there is a little lead there that you may have to cut off just to make sure it doesn't short out between here. Now once that's on, you want to check it to make that it's giving you full power. So the battery, with the battery soldered into place, you should get your full 3 volts. 3 volts from the battery. So now that's checked and that's good. So then you can replace this back in its case, replace the cover, and then return the 2 screws to its location. About now is the Super Nintendo AC adapter, part number SNS 002. If you get a machine in and the light doesn't come on the front of the Super Nintendo, the first thing you need to suspect is the AC adapter. To test the AC adapter, you turn on your voltmeter. The output of this is a DC voltage. It's close to 1 amp. It's about 850 milliamps, I believe. And it's around 10 to 12 volts. So go ahead and plug it in. And then you can use your voltmeter to test. In this case, it's 14 volts DC, unloaded. Once you load it, it probably would give you a different reading, but unloaded it's 14 volts. So this one is good, but let's assume that it is not. Okay, not good. If you don't get any voltage out of here, no voltage out of the end, first thing you need to do is switch your meter to ohms. Okay, in this case I've switched it to ohms. Take your AC adapter, and the first thing you want to test is the primary windings. Take your voltmeter, your ohm meter, and put it across the primary windings, just touching it to these 2 outlet arms. You should get approximately 60 to 65 ohms, somewhere in there. 60 to 65, 50 to 65 is probably the range you want to get. If it reads infinite, it means that your primary winding is burned up, and it probably is not worth repairing at this point. Okay, I'll go over what to do in just a minute. So first of all, check primary windings. Should get about 50 to 65 ohms. If those are fine, then the next thing you need to do is check your secondary. Your secondary, on a good one, should read open. It should read infinite. If it doesn't, then there's probably something in the DC and rectification circuit that's inside. So at that point, you'll want to proceed with opening this and effecting repair, and I'll show you how to do that in just a minute. Okay? So let's assume that this tests good. So we'll proceed with the repair of the AC adapter. If these test bad, if it's an open winding, then you want to go ahead and just get rid of this. What I usually do is sometimes I'll cut the cord off and save the cord and open this up and save some of the components inside, but it's not usually cost effective to do that. Cut the cord and then you can replace this with a generic one, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. Nintendo did say open it up. What I've taken is a pair of needle nose here, I'll show you on the close-up, and I've ground them down on a grinder so that they're real thin and narrow, and I'm able to fit those down inside AC adapter. Okay, and then the screws to the AC adapter, and you can then go ahead and unscrew these. To the top, you can lift the screws out, set them aside, and the will then slide off. You got to be careful with this strain relief. Slide it off. It's at the top side. That exposes the inside of the AC adapter. Again, right here is where it usually blows up. If you look, this little wire over here on the left side, that usually blows up when this goes bad. Some of you may be able to jump that and get